Hi, I'm Yaffe.
I'm Yossi Yaffe.
Together we run Chabad of the Shoreline, and we want to wish you a very happy and joyous upcoming holiday of Shavuos, when we receive the Torah once again. Just like we did at Mount Sinai so many years ago, every year we spiritually reenact the Kabbalah SaTorah, the receiving of the Torah, when we said to God, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and then we will listen. The 10 Commandments actually are made up of 620 letters that correspond to the 613 biblical commandments and the 7 rabbinic commandments. So we are accepting our obligation to keep the commandments with joy and enthusiasm. And of course, a little cheesecake doesn't hurt. So the big question is, why? Why did God give us the commandments?
Why did God give us the mitzvahs? This is the big question. Matter of fact, our sages tell us that the entire creation was made in order that the Jewish people do the mitzvos and keep the commandments. And at the giving of the Torah, all of creation waited with bated breath to see if the Jewish people would accept the Torah. So if we explore a little bit, why did God decide to create the world in the first place? We can have a better understanding of why God gave us commandments. These are intertwined with one another. So we're going to explore 2 different approaches that ultimately will be seen holistically as giving us a better understanding of why we are here and why the mitzvahs are so intrinsic to us and to creation.
So why did God create the world? For us.
Maybe for God.
God made the world for us. He doesn't need a world. And Judaism teaches teva hatov lehetiv. It's the nature of good to do good. So God, who's intrinsically good, wants to do good to another. He is kind, and so he wants to be kind to us. He made a world to be good to us.
So there's another approach which says even defining God as good is a definition. Rather, the Midrash says that God desired to have a home in the lower realms. This is a concept you may have heard from your Chabad rabbi more than once, that all of creation is because God wants a dwelling place in a world that seems separate and distant and disconnected from the divine. And we make it a home for God by revealing godliness in all things, all people, all places, all times. And this way we make this world a place for God. So on this approach, it is not about God wanting to do good for us, but something deeper. God had a desire. We can't understand the why, because a desire, you don't ask questions about it. It's something innate. So it's telling us that we human beings do not have the capacity to understand the why, but we can understand the what. The what is God wants a dwelling place in the lower realms, which means all the mitzvot are here for one purpose and one purpose only, to make a dwelling place for the divine. Maybe I'll have to walk back that idea of one purpose and one purpose only. But this approach says that the core is about a dwelling place for the divine.
God gave us the mitzvos for the same reason he made the world in the first place. He wants to be good to us. Every mitzvah is good to us and for us in some way.
So yes, that is true. But if we look at from this perspective, it is every mitzvah is somehow revealing godliness in the world and making the world fit for God. And it's not so much about us as about God.
Okay, the challenge with that approach is that it implies that we have the power to impact God. Since God is infinite and we're finite, how do our deeds matter to him as he is? As it says in the book of Job, if you sin, do you hurt God? If you do a mitzvah, do you help him? The mitzvahs seem to be about us, not about God.
That's a very important point. How do we impact him? It's rather that God chooses to be impacted. He says, when you do what is right, good, and holy, I will be happy, and you will make a dwelling place in this realm.
How can human beings understand the reasons for God's commandments? We're limited, but God is infinite. It says in the Torah, keep these laws, and the nations around you will say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. And the word that it uses for laws, keep these laws, is chukim. So it's clear that everyone can understand the wisdom in the commandments, even the commandments that are above reason. Somehow people will see that they're wise and meaningful.
So On the other hand, we say, God says through the prophet Yeshaya, my thoughts are not your thoughts, as the heavens is higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours. That we, in truth, we cannot really understand God's ways or thoughts. Whatever we understand is a limited glimmer of the true reason for the mitzvahs. Even the rational ones that we think we understand, in truth, there are deeper reasons in the mind of God that we can't understand.
So if all the mitzvahs have reasons, why do we have different categories of mitzvahs? Some are called moral, some are called super rational. The moral ones you're supposed to feel in your heart. Don't steal. The idea of stealing should feel totally anathema to us. Taking something that doesn't belong to us should be understood and felt as wrong. The super rational laws, like kosher, are different. When faced with a non-kosher food, we can say, I'm not restraining from eating it because I don't want to eat it, but because God said not to eat it. For the super rational, we should try to find reasons for it, but for every reason we do find, there will be many, many more reasons.
Right. So God is not a health inspector telling us not to keep kosher and not to eat pork because of some health issues. Rather, there's deeper levels of meanings for every mitzvah. But the idea that we should do the super rational laws like the logical ones, that we should look for reasons because the human being wants to understand what they're doing, can be really is one side of the coin. There's another approach, which is more the Hasidic approach, which says even the rational laws we should do because God commanded, not because we understand. If I'm doing a mitzvah, if I'm observing a commandment because I understand it, I think it's right, and it resonates with me, I'm not really serving God. I'm serving myself.
Every single mitzvah, including the super rational, will in some way affect us. It will either make us more sensitive to others, make us look at the world in the proper way, or help us to act in a more ethical manner.
So the challenge of that is the details of the Torah are so extensive, every mitzvah, to find symbolism behind every part is very difficult. So in those who try to explain the rational reasons for the mitzvot, like Maimonides, they recognize that limitation. The mystics, on the other hand, do find how in every detail of the mitzvah, there's some great spiritual truth. And this exploration goes on, finding in every mitzvah layers and levels of meaning.
It's true we may not understand all the reasons for the details of the mitzvos, but every detail can give benefit to our souls. Just like certain types of fuel are best for certain engines, God tells us, again, back to the kosher example, which foods are best for our soul and what we need to do to nourish our soul.
So I would say from that perspective, the intent of the mitzvah has much greater weight than from my perspective that I'm presenting. In other words, the idea that every mitzvah has reason, the more you understand, the more you're doing of that mitzvah. But in the vision that I'm doing it just for God's sake, because God wants a dwelling place, that's all I have to know, so to speak. It's called the general intent as opposed to the specific intent of every single mitzvah.
So of course the mitzvahs have value even if I don't understand the reason for each one. I can use a computer like I'm doing right now even if I don't understand how it's doing what it's doing. The mitzvahs have an impact on our mind, body, and soul even when we don't know exactly how or even what is being helped.
And even more so, we can say that the mitzvah sensitizes us to understand the mystical and deeper spiritual meaning of why we're doing what we're doing. You can't appreciate Shabbos until you've kept Shabbos. It's not just an intellectual approach. It's through the experience of Shabbos, the divine will and the divine flow that comes into our life changes us in that way. So it's not just logic and reason that helps us understand. It's something deeper.
True. However, the more you learn about Shabbos, the more you'll appreciate it. The more you understand the reasons for every law and custom, the more meaningful it becomes. The mystics explain that we unite with God by doing the mitzvah. Mitzvah comes from the word connection. We become one with God. God gave us 613 ropes for us to connect our soul to God. This is the ultimate good, for the human being to be one with God and one with our source.
So here we are, we're getting closer together. We're coming to a point of agreement here. And I would just add that from this perspective, that the ultimate good is not about my soul uniting with God. That is a wonderful benefit. So this idea that godliness is permeating the world is seen as being the ultimate benefit for the human being, to fulfill the will of God and the purpose of creation. And what is greater than to give God pleasure?
Okay. So how can we reconcile these two approaches? On the one hand, we say it's all about God. On the other hand, we say it's about the good we get from doing the mitzvos. So really, we would have to say
both are true.
Both are true. The ultimate good for us is not in this world, and the ultimate good is not in heaven. The ultimate good is to become one with God by doing the mitzvos and making this world into his home.
The ultimate dwelling place for God is not enough for us to just impact the world around us. We have to impact our heart, our mind, our soul. We have to understand why we're doing the mitzvot, get a deeper appreciation for every mitzvah through understanding. Then when we do that, so then we make a home for God, not just in the world around us, but in each part of us. That is what we're looking forward to on Shavuos, where we commit ourselves once again to accepting all the commandments, making the world a home for God, and of course, internalizing the messages of each mitzvah. Wishing you a wonderful Shavuos, accepting the Torah in joy and inwardly.
Amen.